Our first question this week is from Yell County Hog 21, who asked, when will the media get to interview the coordinators and assistants? Okay, the two coordinators have already been interviewed by a couple of media outlets. I think there'll be some more that do it maybe later this week and next week. But I'm told that the rest of the assistant coaches will not be available until after signing day. They're awfully busy, and there are a lot of those guys, so you just have to wait to hear from the assistant coaches. But the two coordinators have already talked a lot, and what they basically said is pretty interesting. But we'll have to wait a little while to hear from all of that coaching staff. Cool Hog reminds me that you recently said you were told Hunter Yurachek didn't hire Mike Leach because he wanted too much money. Now that Mississippi State has hired him, do you think your information was accurate? Well, that's not exactly what I said. I said that Hunter Yurachek had the impression that money was the main factor for Leach. He wanted about $5 million a year. That would have been tough for Arkansas to come up with, but I think they could have come up with the money if there had been a real connection between Mike Leach and Hunter Yurachek, and I don't think there was on Yurachek's part. Mike Leach is a strange guy. He's kind of quiet, and he's not somebody that's going to get all emotional like Sam Pittman did when he found out that he might have a shot at the job. I think we all know that that's one of the things that won Hunter Yurachek over, both with Eric Musselman and Sam Pittman, was the just overwhelming impression they gave. I want this job. I'm not just looking for a job. I want this job. And Mike Leach didn't do that in his interview. And so, again, a lot's been said about Arkansas didn't have the money to pay him. I don't agree with that. I think it would have been a little bit of a stretch. But if they had really wanted him and there had been a good connection there, I think they would have come up with the $5 million that Mississippi State came up with. But the bottom line is, I think Mississippi State has a home run hire there. I mean, boy, they were in trouble. You fire a coach in January, that's asking for it. And they reached down and pulled a rabbit out of their hat with Mike Leach. But I think Arkansas got a good coach too. And now the entire SEC West is just loaded with coaches. And Sam Pittman's got his work cut out for him, but he's off to a good start. 2 and 10 again wants to know, do you think we are one solid quarterback away from a possible bowl appearance next season? That's an overstatement. Yes, it would help. A better quarterback would help make better use of that wide receiver core, which is probably, along with the running back, the starting running back, Rakeem Boyd, that's the strength of this offense. So if you put a quarterback in there that's effective, and we didn't have much of that last year or the last 2 years, then I think that's going to make a big difference. But there are other issues. You got to get an offensive line that can protect that quarterback, whoever that quarterback is. I mentioned this before. Arkansas ended up the season with 3 different quarterbacks under concussion protocol. You don't want to have that happen. If you've got one that you're really going to go with, and I assume we're not going to have this quarterback rotation anymore, then you got to protect the guy. So the offensive line's got to get better, and then the entire defense has got to get better. So in answer to your question, a better quarterback would help you get a few more wins, but I don't think it would make the difference between getting to a bowl game or not. It'd have to have more help than just that. Okay, Bacon the Saddle again says most Razorback coaches tend to focus on the traditional recruiting footprint. Pittman is doing something non-traditional with Texas and Louisiana, but also Georgia, Florida, and the JUCOs. Do you think this strategy will pay off? I talked about this last week. Just the fact that it's a different area that's not very unusual. Each coach will come in here with a different area that he recruits. If you recall, Brett Bielema came in and he had strong ties to Florida and basically went in there and got some really good players. And most Razorback coaches have not had that tie to Florida. But what's different about Pittman is that he went out and found assistant coaches who have good ties to high school coaches in specific areas. They're not just giving a guy a big giant area. Okay, you've got Texas. Okay, you've got Louisiana. We're talking about having a coach that's got a good connection in East Texas, another one in Central Texas, another one in Houston, another one in South Louisiana, one in the Atlanta Metro. We've got coaches that basically have recruited Missouri all the way up to St. Louis. And then you got a head coach that's recruited a lot of different states. So again, what's different about this staff is I think every one of these guys was hired, yes, for their ability to coach, but also because they had specific ties to high school coaches in areas that Sam Pittman feels like Arkansas needs to get players out of those areas. Okay, Blood Red Hog asks, with the football staff focused on recruiting and the first spring practice not until March, what can the current staff do with the players on campus now? Are there NCAA rules regarding what a staff can do in the offseason in regards to diet and exercise programs? Well, there are specific rules, and the regular coaching staff can't get involved in what's starting up right now, and that's the winter conditioning program. And that started this week. And basically, you've got your strength staff, and Sam Pittman went out and brought in the number 2 and number 3 guys on the strength staff at Georgia, brought them in here. They've got a staff they're working with, and these are the guys that have the first contact, direct contact with Arkansas's players. And then what will happen there is the coaches can't watch this stuff, but the strength coach people and strength and conditioning coaches can go in after a day's session and say, okay, this is what went on today. This guy looked good. This guy didn't. He needs to do better, blah, blah, blah. They discuss that. And then the coaches can go discuss that with the players. So it's kind of a roundabout way of doing this, but it's the strength and conditioning people that are on deck right now doing the work, and the regular coaching staff won't be working directly with these players until spring football. Now, Sam Pittman, and I think I mentioned last week that what I would be doing on this show each week is mentioning things that look good early on in terms of the decisions that Pittman is making. I mean, I don't want to just jump through the roof and say, hey, this guy's a home run hire. You got to be able to have specific reasons why you think he's doing a good job. Well, here's an area where I think he's doing a good job, because he announced last week that he's going to push spring football back as far as he can and extend that winter conditioning program. Why is he doing that? Well, he wants to give these players more time to work with the strength and conditioning coaches and get them in the kind of shape that Sam Pittman wants. If you'll recall, Chad Morris wanted lighter, quicker players because he said they were going to run a hurry-up offense, and then they never did it. So it was kind of self-defeating. I think you're going to see Sam Pittman go more for size and strength. Still want these guys to be able to run and have speed, but wants them a little bigger, especially in the offensive line. So you're going to spend more time in the winter conditioning program, and then that also gives each of these coaches more time to get to know these players. There's only one assistant coach on this staff that was held over from the previous staff. So for most of these guys, it's a matter right now of getting to know these players, and that's just now starting to happen as they've come back to get ready for school starting. So again, you're giving more time for your coaches to get to know these guys before they actually start working with them in spring football. And then here's another added benefit. Chad Morris came in that very first spring and he moved the red-white game up. And so what did we end up with? We ended up with that ridiculous game in Little Rock where the wind chill factor was below freezing because he didn't know anything apparently about the weather here. This is not Dallas. It gets colder later in the year here than it does in Dallas. So again, there's no guarantee if you move the game back 2 or 3 weeks that you'll get warmer or better weather, but there's a good chance of it, and that's just another added benefit of Sam Pittman wanting to move spring football back and extend the off-season conditioning program. Okay, said 76 asked who was really responsible for the Chad Morris hire in December of 2017. Internet rumors that some swear by says Jerry Jones insisted on the hire. Others blame Julia Cromer Peoples. Jeff Long had been fired, so who was truly running the circus during that search? Man, we seem to be getting that question every week. I don't know why people can't listen, because I believe the people that watch this show are a lot of them are the ones that ask the question. I've answered this question about 4 times, so I'm going to do it one more time and then I'm leaving it because, you know, Chad Morris is gone. It's over and done with. It was frustrating, but one more time, the official word about how that hire came about was that Julia Peoples made it. Now, the people I talked to at the time said this all started with those shadowy boosters that were trying to bring in Gus Malzahn. And when they couldn't get him, either Malzahn told one or two of them directly, or maybe it came from Jimmy Sexton, his agent, but it was as, hey, if you can't get Gus, but you can get Chad Morris because he's a lot like Gus. And so for whatever reason, they thought that was a big deal. That got passed on to Julia Peoples, and she vetted this guy and thought Chad Morris was the guy. She bragged when she left here for another job that it was one of the best hires she'd ever made. I don't know if she's changed her mind on that. But again, the critical thing here is don't let boosters get involved in hiring coaches. It's a mistake. Now, we've got Hunter Yurachek. He goes out and hires, he gets him a basketball coach, Eric Musselman, and what happens? He got some pushback on that initially. Now, he was able to push back against the pushback and hire the guy he wanted. But now we move to this football search. There's no question that boosters were hanging around the perimeter trying to get somebody other than Sam Pittman. And Yurachek ended up getting the guy he wanted. And here's the important thing about that. When you hire somebody like Eric Musselman and it works out, and it sure looks like it is working out, and if this Sam Pittman hire turns out to be as good, then you got an AD that's getting stronger and stronger, and he's able to fend off these boosters. I mean, Frank Briles didn't have problems with boosters because he'd established himself. Hunter Yurachek hadn't been here long enough to totally do that, but I think he's well on the path to getting these boosters out of the way, and I think the sooner the better on that. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Holman 24 wants to know, with the staff complete, would you say this is a top 5 Arkansas coaching staff? I guess you mean top 5 of all time at Arkansas, not top 5 in the country. And I can only go back to Frank Broyles' last 2 teams. That was the first staff I covered. And that was the best coaching staff I've seen. Jimmy Johnson was on that staff, for instance. There were a lot of other good coaches on that staff. They went to the Cotton Bowl. They won the Cotton Bowl. That was a good staff. And then a lot of those guys were still around for Lou Holtz, and he brought some of his own people in. Lou Holtz had a good staff, at least for the first 2 or 3 years. After that, Ken Hatfield was a great head coach himself, but his staff was not up to those standards. Jack Crow didn't have a good staff. Danny Ford's staff was dysfunctional. They fought with each other all the time. So that wasn't a good staff. Houston Nutt had 1 or 2 good coaches on his staff, but it wasn't an overall a real strong staff. Then you end up with Bobby Petrino. Again, Petrino's a strong head coach, didn't have a good staff. You go to Brett Bielema. Brett Bielema had a good staff for about 2 to 3 years, and then it started to come apart on him. They started leaving, and he didn't replace some of these coaches with the quality of what he had had. So I'm just going to say, just casually thinking about this staff on paper right now looks to me to be top 3 since I got here. They'll have to prove that, but right now it looks like at least it would be in the top 3. I was there in 1969, recall, several years ago at Tiger Stadium. You were doing a live report back to Fayetteville, and suddenly we're surrounded by several inebriated fans. Was that the most upset you've ever been at opposing fans? And which SEC institution, in your opinion, has a fan base with the least amount of class? Actually, you may be confusing 2 separate incidents. The only time I had any issue at LSU was one night, and by the way, LSU has a secure area for television stations to go live next to the stadium. And by secure, I don't mean you're inside, but you've got ropes around that area, and they have security, and it's generally an okay place to go live without being harassed. One particular night, there were a couple of co-eds. I mean, they weren't being mean or nasty or anything. They were just drunk, and they wanted on the air, and they somehow got over the ropes. We weren't on yet, but we had to kind of talk them down, and then we were able to get security to come over, and so nobody ever saw that. What you're probably confusing that with is an incident at the College World Series where Arkansas was getting ready to play LSU, and some teenagers overran our live shot, and that was in progress. We were doing the live shot, and they came in and started yelling and bumping and pushing people. And I thought we had pitched away from that live shot and gone to a package on Norm Van Horn, a report on Norm DeBryan. Thought we'd gone to a report where Norm DeBryan was interviewed, and it was fairly lengthy, about a minute and a half. So I thought I had about a minute, minute and a half to clear those people out, and actually it was on the air. Now the interesting thing is, right after that happened, the next day, a city councilman from Omaha came and found me. He apologized, said they'd had a lot of trouble with stuff like that. They'd also had trouble with local teenagers, high school kids, and then college kids getting out there drinking, fighting with each other, mixing it up with the fans that were out there. That for years and years and years, that park around Rosenblatt Stadium was a great place to tailgate for fans that were there to watch the College World Series. They'd put down a blanket and have a picnic out there under the trees, and this was getting all messed up by these local high school and college kids. So that's the main reason they built TD Ameritrade Park in the downtown area. And a lot of people were upset, oh, we don't have anywhere to tailgate anymore. Well, the idea is you tailgate at a restaurant, because there are restaurants all up and down and around that baseball facility, and there are hotels all around there. So it's all centrally located. You stay in a hotel, you walk 3 blocks, you're at the stadium, you walk up and down, you've got all kinds of places to eat. You just don't have a place where you can sit on the grass. That's the price you have to pay not to have all these kids out there running around going bonkers. Okay, which fan base? Okay, just off the top of my head, I don't like some of the stuff that goes on at Ole Miss. It doesn't have anything to do with their regular fans. It's mostly the frat boys on campus. If you're in the media and you're trying to go live anywhere around that on that campus, you got to watch out for the frat boys. They'll come by, honk their horns, flip you off, cuss at you. It's really annoying. So that's probably the place I least like to go to. Okay, Jumpity asks, what are your thoughts on Pittman making his final on-field coach a special teams coordinator? Personally, I like the hire because it's been a while since our special teams have been special. Yeah, I agree with that. Special teams are important, and I don't understand why more coaches don't understand that. You take a guy like Barry Lundy and you say, yeah, you're the tight ends coach, and that's mainly what you do, but let's put you over here with special teams. Let's split your duties. And it doesn't work out. Special teams can get you beat. Special teams can make your coaching staff look silly, and we saw some of that. So I like the idea that Sam Pittman has gone out, hired a guy who's a dedicated special teams coach, who knows how to do that, who has experience doing that. He brought this guy in from Georgia. So I'm anxious to see if we have improved special teams play as a result of having a full-time special teams coach, which I think is a good idea. Okay, Lake City Hog is curious about Kendall Briles, the offensive coordinator. Do you see the quarterback position or how do you see the quarterback position playing out? Does Briles seem to prefer a larger body type at quarterback or a smaller, quicker body type? I guess I'm asking Jefferson or Jones. I think that's the wrong question, Jefferson or Jones. I'll get into that in a minute. Kendall Briles did a couple of interviews last week, and basically it wasn't anything surprising. He's a run-pass guy. In other words, he wants a quarterback that can run and throw. No quarterback coach or offensive coordinator is going to tell you, yeah, I like a small, quick guy. What you want is a tall guy that can throw the ball who's also fast. So I don't think anybody prefers a midget, running around out there because he's quick. You want a tall, big guy that's quick. Now, as far as who's going to be the quarterback next year, could be KJ Jefferson, but I also am pretty sure they're attempting at this time to bring in a grad transfer. I'm not at liberty to say who he is, but if this young man comes in, I'm pretty sure he would be the starting quarterback next year. They are recruiting a high school quarterback, a 4-star kid. I'm told by people that know about recruiting that he's probably not a guy that's going to be ready to be a starting quarterback as a true freshman. So I don't know, the only other guy I can think about is Jack Lindsey. This is a kid that was intriguing in that he was a walk-on for almost 4 years, finally got a scholarship, had worked real hard all through that time. He's the grandson of Razorback great Jim Lindsey. He was a fiend in the weight room, got himself bigger and stronger, dropped his 40 time from 5 flat in high school to 4.7. If he continues to work under this new staff, gets himself down into the 4.65 range, if he gets his arm strength up, gets himself more physical, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could win that job, but I really think, as I stand here right now, that if they get this grad transfer, that grad transfer is going to be the starting quarterback next fall. Hogapalooza wants to know, in your 4 decades of covering the Hogs, have you ever seen a coach so candid in disappointment and still be optimistic as Coach Muss was the day after the LSU loss? You know, that's a good point, and I'm not sure I have seen that. It is interesting. When the job search thing was going on that eventually produced Eric Musselman, when his name first came up, there was a booster out there that didn't want him. He wanted another guy as coach. And we started, I don't know everybody in the media, I started hearing this, that you're not going to like this guy. He's a big crybaby after games. He gets mad, he throws a fit, he's not going to like you guys in the media asking tough questions. And I'm thinking, really? Are you serious? Well, we know now that was completely ridiculous. Now, look, Musselman hasn't lost but 2 games. But in both instances, he did what you said. He broke down the problems, was very matter of fact about what went wrong, but at least, and he certainly wasn't angry about it, he was just analytical. And then he was very optimistic by the next day about how they were going to fix those problems. And I think he does that because these guys work so hard and they are so prepared for games that he believes that whatever problems come up, you can spend the next 2 or 3 days working to correct them. I also think he likes this team, these players. They're not guys that, argue with him. They're not guys that push back against instruction or coaching. So when a coach feels like players listen, when you've got a team that's 13-2 and nobody thought they were going to be doing that, it's pretty easy, I think, to be optimistic even after you lose a game. Now, if they lose 2 or 3 quickly, maybe 2 in a row or whatever, it may be a different story. But so far, the point you make is interesting because he's very analytical after a loss, but then by the next day, he's being very positive. Blood Red Hog wants to know, what is the story with the shirts Coach Musselman wears in press conferences? One day it's Pepsi, then it's Hellman's Mayo, then some other well-known product. All have Razorback logos on them as well. All right, here's what that is. At some point, Eric Musselman went to Hunter Yurachek and he said, look, I would like to do something to help those people, those businesses that sponsor Razorback basketball. So why don't you get me some shirts and get the logos of these various companies that support our basketball program, and I'll wear these shirts around and give them extra publicity. And he's not getting any money from this. Those of you who think, okay, he's a walking billboard, he's getting paid. I remember years ago, Lou Holtz had this Amana hat. He was the first one I ever saw do that. And he did all these interviews with a Amana hat on. And somebody asked him what the deal with that was, and he said he just liked Amana products. I mean, good grief, we knew what was going on there. He was getting paid for that. But Eric Musselman is not getting paid to wear these logos on these shirts. He's simply doing it to help those companies that support Razorback basketball. Okay, Lanny says, this basketball team never quits and is 13-2, but we have fans complaining in games about mistakes. Then they kind of look bad when Arkansas comes back and wins the game. What's it going to take to satisfy some of these people? You know, a lot of Razorback fans are convinced that the Hogs are snake bit, the entire athletic program, or maybe cursed. Remember that curse of Nolan thing? Nolan gets fired, and then all of a sudden somebody comes up with this idea the basketball program has gone completely under because somehow Nolan has been wronged. So the only way to get rid of it, get rid of the curse, is to do something to make up for it. So years later, they named the court after Nolan, and then all of a sudden, woo, we're winning again. It's big. It's like it used to be. Well, I don't think that's why Eric Musselman and his players are winning right now. If you want to believe that, that's fine. But I do think there's a long history of kind of heartbreaking situations at this school, going all the way back to the '69 game, the way they lost that game, the way they were one caught foul ball away from winning the College World Series, and then it just turns around and all of a sudden you don't win it. So I think a lot of fans sort of have this kind of attitude that when's the hammer going to drop? And specifically with this basketball team, we all know what the problem is. They don't have a bench and they don't have any height. And so people are waiting for the wheels to drop off of this basketball team. I'm not saying it can't happen, but when you get this far in and you're this far into conference play, they've already won a conference road game, I don't think it's going to fall apart. They may not win the league or continue to win at this rate, but they're about 6 wins away from putting themselves in the NCAA tournament. I think they're going to get in this year, and considering what's going to happen next year, where you're not going to have height problems, you're not going to have a small bench, everything's going to this year to me is gravy. So I would, if I could, I would tell these people to relax, but it wouldn't do them any good. It's just kind of built into you if you have that attitude. Okay, we're going to close this thing out today with a baseball question. Arkansas wide receiver asks, will this be our best baseball team of the Dave Van Horn era? Last year for Martin and Kerstad, also top 5 recruiting classes for the last couple of years. Interesting, I was out there today at Baum Stadium. This was the first day of baseball practice for this 2020 team. You can't tell much from watching out there. They were going through batting practice, infield. They do have, this is the guy that was interesting. They do have a kid that's coming in early out of high school. His dad is, I think, the GM of the Kansas City Royals. He's got, Major League Baseball in his DNA. He's a really good middle infielder, a second baseman. That's where he was working today. I watched him take some batting practice. He can hit the baseball. But Dave Van Horn dropped by just for a second and told me that this kid turns a double play quicker than anybody he's ever seen. And I watched him. If he does that in games, the way he did that out in practice today, he might take a half step off a kid that's about to beat an infield base hit out. So I think he's going to be interesting to watch. They did infield for a while, and then Van Horn stopped and had that dirt all fixed up again. They drug the little thing behind the tractor, because where this kid was standing out near second base was all torn up. And it took the guy on the tractor about 6 passes to fix that area. I mean, this kid's in constant motion. He thinks he can get anything that's hit. I mean, a ball can be hit down the first baseline, he's over at second. He's trying to go for it. He's just constant energy, in motion, but man, is he lightning quick. And he's got a quick release when he gets that ball in his glove. The way he turns to second and fires that ball, or turns to first and fires that ball from second, is really impressive. But to answer your question, is it the best team Dave Van Horn's had? The best team he's had so far was, as I mentioned, 1 out away from winning the national championship. So the only way this team could be better was if they win the national championship. I'm not going to stand here and tell you they're going to do that. I don't even know if they'll get to the College World Series. Sometimes you can have a better team and not get there. But I will say that this team starts the season in 3 preseason polls so far. They're top 10, and that's pretty good. That's a pretty good place to start. Baseball season, the games start in about a month. Well, that's it for another week. Join me next Monday for another edition of Ask Mike.